Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We have a very attention-grabbing title today, Stop Bleeding Cash. I think the slide deck is also in fitting colors, as you will see on the next slide. Thank you, Stefan. And here with me is Stefan Pavlik. You introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm responsible for communications and marketing with VOQUZ Labs. And I'm here to actually ask the questions that fit the title. So might be a bit provocative. I see myself as your advocate, basically. And because Jens is an expert with deep thoughts about the subject, I'm trying to stay top level and come back at it and make us all understand what this is about. Jens, if you want to, off we go.
Yeah, we'll be a little bit more hands-on than just crying about bleeding cash. Yeah, my name is Jens Kettler. I'm also with VOQUZ Labs and responsible for our risk and compliance product that is called remQ. Part of remQ is controls for data quality, and today's topic is part of that. The title says duplicate business partners, vendors, and customers, but actually, a lot of the stuff that we discussed today can be applied to other master data and financial documents in SAP, and I think even outside of SAP. It's not really a very SAP-specific topic today, but of course, absolutely important in all ERP systems. Maybe can we start with the first slide? Stefan, thank you. Yeah, so I mentioned this already. It's not just business partners, and you have a couple of examples here on this first slide, and all the our viewers here in the webinar probably are aware. Many companies have issues with duplicate vendors, customers. I hope not employees. That's a little bit more unusual, I believe, but in general, different types of master data in financial documents could be duplicated. We had another webinar on a similar topic some time ago about duplicate invoices. We also have a lot of material about these different things on our website and our blogs. I think we have a link a little bit later and some examples. And we have tried to come up with really hands-on things that you can try out yourself in your system without the need to buy any software or to install something, but very simple Excel analysis, you might say. So what is the problem with duplicate master data? And I will be very quick here. I think most of our viewers are kind of familiar with these problems that can occur. If you have a duplicate invoice, you might pay it twice. If you have two vendors that are actually one, the same company, that actually can trigger that you have a duplicate invoice. If you have two customers, then maybe the credit limits don't work anymore. If you have two materials instead of one, then, for instance, materials requirements planning might go wrong. So materials requirements planning is kind of, you take all your sales orders and what you want to ship, you subtract the current stock, and then you calculate using your bill of materials how much materials you have to order and what type. And that can also go wrong if you don't know that you have maybe duplicate and wrong material master.
Doesn't it also happen when somebody is not really very specific about the company form? Here in Germany or in Austria, we would have GmbH, GmbH, and stuff like that, and you would then think, okay, this is the same company and might actually produce different stuff.
I think we come to that to the next slide. That's true. Company names are definitely an issue, and it can be different reasons why you have two different vendors. So recently, a partner of ours, he converted the company, which was a US LLC, to a C Corp, the so-called Inc. Incorporated or a corporation. And instead of changing your master data, somebody could have maybe set up this as a new vendor. And then you have the old company name, and even the name might change. And definitely the legal form changes, as you mentioned. In Germany, it's GmbH and AG for Aktiengesellschaft. In the US, it's LLC and C Corp forms and so on and so forth. And so how would you move forward and try to detect that? And it really depends on the scenario. So first of all, and here's a couple of examples. That's more on the customer side, where you separate between if you're a B2C or a B2B business. There is very large B2C businesses running on SAP. The Apple iTunes store, for instance, is an SAP shop, so to say. It's running on SAP. And how do you make sure that your users there are really kind of unique? The name will probably not be sufficient, maybe even not the country. But in some cases, you don't have much more information. What you often have is an email address, and that definitely is unique. So if you want to find out whether somebody is the same person, you might want to use the email address. But even there's problems. I have a Gmail address, and you can send an email to me at gmail.com or at googlemail.com, and they both arrive.
Still arrives, yeah. And what about people using the same, using different email addresses for one transaction? For example, you register yourself on the website and then you pay with a PayPal address where you use a different email address on it. So is there a way to sort of have a look at all of that and merge it and say, oh, that this is very probably that very person?
I think it's difficult. I think we come to that also in a second. None of the methods will work 100%. The goal is to, if you do a detection analysis, so to say, the goal is to have not so many false negatives. That means there are duplicates and you don't find them in your analysis. And at the same time, you want to optimize to reduce the false positive rate, because you don't want to look at potentially hundreds or thousands of hits and try to sort out manually what is a real hit or not. In more technical terms, what you try to optimize is the two things like recall. That means, do you find the true duplicates? Recall and precision. That means, how precise is your method? Do you find duplicates, or do you also find other stuff? False positives. And to optimize that, you have to kind of try and figure out what's the best method. And the best method will depend on the scenario. Like, do you have individuals with names like Stefan Pavlik, or do you have, for instance, organizations, companies as your vendors, for instance, like VOQUZ Lab? And depending on that, you will need to optimize the method. It's even different than if you talk about materials and other master data or other financial documents. So it's really something that depends on the master data type, on the financial document type.
And this doesn't depend on what department I'm in. So this is useful for me probably when I'm just not being very well taking care of my CRM, and then talking to accounting and bringing those two departments together, because I have a system that's helping me check on both sides.
I mean, ideally, organizations have a master data governance system in place. With system, I don't necessarily mean software like a master data management software, but
a process
that would be great. But at least a process, and both things together make a real process, so to say, if you automate things. But even in that case, I mean, if you use Salesforce for marketing and lead creation, and then you turn it into a customer, but maybe that system is running on SAP, then there is even different places where the duplicates could be created. And it might even be that maybe even during an automated transfer from a lead to a customer, issues could arise. And you could have different sources for customers. Maybe not all customers come from Salesforce, but maybe different channels. So do you have like a golden record of, in this example, the customer data type? That's an important question. But I mean, let's not look at the whole process, because that's even more complicated than just looking at trying to detect duplicates of a business partner in one system. Usually then you have a table, there you have the names, and the examples that we have here in this case, many of them, they are applicable for businesses. Again, it's a little bit different for individuals. So, and even here we see abbreviations as an issue, and sometimes limited or limited, and then the different legal forms. So how can you handle them? One idea is what's sometimes also referred to as stop words. You set up an analysis where you remove certain words from like a list of words that you prepare, like a small dictionary, and you will not take those words into the analysis, like the legal forms, limited, GmbH, and so on and so forth. That's one thing you can do. I think on the next slide I have a proposal for an even simpler approach, but that's something one can do. Then the next thing, and that's maybe more important for individuals, is if you do a phonetic similarity analysis on names. Yeah, Vladimir Putin in German is with a W. Vladimir Putin in English is with a V at the beginning. They sound very similar, the two names, and both the German and English speaker probably will pronounce it in the same way. But depending on whether the employee is a native German or native English speaker, he might enter the name in a different way. And many examples, in particular, I'm German, but I'm familiar with many examples in the German language. Like there's so many ways you can write the word or the name Schmidt or Meyer, and they all sound the same, but they might look very different. So that means that just looking at the characters out of which a word is composed, that can even be also a problem and lead to not finding true hits. Using analysis on the characters, that's the next thing here, the so-called edit distance. Levenstein is a very simple example. Jaro Winkler is a bit more sophisticated and probably also more often used. What you do there is you compare the characters that compose a word or a name token. So Stefan Pavlik, 2 tokens, yeah, first name, last name, what's often referred to as a token. And you just count how many characters are different and how many deletions you have, or maybe you have a switch, yeah, two characters are flipped because somebody was typing very fast, and these are the typical things that happen. And so the edit distance you can calculate, and that gives you also a measure for the similarity. Another issue, again, in particular with names for individuals, is that the name tokens are out of order. Yeah? Some customers and some systems, they save a name in maybe one field, Stefan Pavlik in one field. Others, they might have a first name field, a last name field, and maybe some people even enter the name in a different way, Pavlik, Stefan. So,
but I think in our case, it might actually be pretty easy to distinguish what's a first name, what's a last name. Sometimes I have troubles actually talking to people from different mentalities, different countries, where I say, well, to be honest, and not even be rude about it, I don't even know what the first name is or the last name. And sometimes I can't even tell the sex. So I'm not sure who I'm talking to. So I'm trying to be, really wary about it. Yeah.
Sometimes people cannot tell their sex themselves. But okay. Yeah.
Is there a solution for that as well?
Not a software solution, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah, so the sorting out that the tokens are in the right or in a different order, that's another thing that can be taken into account. And of course, this is really a field where, in particular, large language models, ChatGPT or Gemini or Llama from Facebook, they really shine. I mean, they're trained on natural language and different languages, and I can just encourage everybody to go to, I don't know, for instance, ChatGPT, and just prompt the tool whether something written in Arabic, for instance, or in Chinese, whether this name is similar to however you write the same name in, for instance, in Latin, and also ask the tool to take into account transliteration issues, nicknames, phonetic similarity, and the cultural background of how the name is written, and the analysis is perfect. The problem, if you want to do this in an automated software approach, is the LLM will be very good at the interpretation, but it will take very long. If you ask such a prompt to a large language model, you will have response times of at least a second or something. And if you do this for large amounts of names, it's taking long. And in some processes, that's a problem. Sometimes you can afford to spend a lot of time if you just do it like in the background. Maybe that's not so important. If you're in real time creating a customer, you don't want him to wait for several seconds until his name is approved, so to say. Yeah. Maybe you also perform a sanctions check even, and then it takes even longer, and then people get annoyed when the sign up there takes so long.
Yeah, they might even think there is something wrong, and you lose a situation that's actually unnecessary.
Yeah.
Get your point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then also it's expensive. I mean, one such a request will probably cost you a couple of tokens. So that's a token is the kind of how many characters or words actually are processed by the large language model. And that can mean that each such comparison costs not a substantial amount of money in absolute terms, but if it's a cent and you have to do it several hundred or million times, then that can become expensive and again also very slow. So it can be used, but you have to have a smart approach of using such a model. What we have done in our software is a combination of all these things, and it's a quite complex algorithm. But we also found that some elements of this algorithm they contribute a lot, so to say, and some they are just for, I don't know, fine tuning. So it's like this famous 80-20 principle, right? So with a simple approach, maybe you can achieve 80% of the outcome. And what that is, I mentioned these terms already before. You have a good recall. That means you find many real duplicates in the system, maybe not all of them, but many. And the precision is okay, which means you still have an acceptable rate of false positive hits that you need to filter out or sort out in a manual way. So, and what we found is, and this is an example here for doing this for organizations, companies, there, in many cases, the name tokens are not out of order. International business machines, nobody will write business machines international, probably IBM, but could use an abbreviation, IBM, instead of that. But usually the tokens are not out of order. And that means a good approach is what you can do is you can normalize the name. That means you remove certain strange characters that might show up there, commas, for instance. And then you only take the first 6 or 8 or 10 characters of the name and cut off the name after that. This, in many cases, removes all these things like the legal suffix, like incorporated, LLC, GmbH, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
If you make it shorter, you will have more false positives. Your recall will be also higher, but you will at some stage have a not acceptable rate of false positives. So the precision will be low, but your recall will be very good. If you increase the number of characters, your recall will decrease and the precision will be higher. So it's kind of a trade-off, as in many ways. So again, you cut off the name. And can you show the slide again? You cut off the name after a certain number of characters. And then you compare the residual name, these 6 or 8 or 10 characters, or maybe even 5 only, using a simple fuzzy matching like Levenstein or Yaro-Winkler that would also account for small typos that come up. So when we did this in our testing, we had really good results with that. As I said, we went further, but for a do-it-yourself analysis, this can be a good approach because very often if you do it like in an audit scenario, you do it once, you usually can live with a higher false positive rate. You have to do it once, you go through all the false positives, but you have some success. You know, at the end of the day, you will find duplicates, and that's the business value, so to say. Yeah. Okay, the price is you have to look at a few false positives. That's annoying, but it's a one-time effort, so to say, and then you can move on with your life. And maybe you decide that you want to automate it or use a more sophisticated approach in the future, but you know that there are results. Yeah? It's something that you can use. So we did that, and so here's examples how you can get the data out of the SAP system. So And that depends a little bit on who you are, so to say, in your organization, whether you have access to the data on a table level, if you can use and create a query, like in the query viewer, and so on and so forth. So you can go there, download the list of names. Maybe you analyze additional attributes. In particular, I would recommend try also to get the country information. That's often very helpful. And you load them into Excel, and then and I don't want to go into the detail how the Excel formula looks like, but basically in Excel you can run a fuzzy comparison on these names. We have a very detailed description of that, even for different scenarios, on our blog. We have created 2 or 3 do-it-yourself blog articles that really describe in detail how you do this in Excel with SAP. One example here is sanction list screening. It's not really a duplicate analysis, but we have described how you can get the US official sanction list, where you can download it, how you can import it into Excel, how you can import your customer names, and how you can run a fuzzy matching between names in the sanction list and names from your customer system, for instance, and do this kind of analysis. And we have another article, it's also on the website, and you have a link to our website and the blog page here in the presentation, where it's really kind of step by step with screenshots. And I can just recommend, go there, maybe play around with that, take into account that you might want to use other data as well. Maybe you have tax IDs, maybe you have bank information. You should add country information. You can think about whether you want to play around, use 4, 6, 8, 10 characters of the organization name, and play around with that and see how these things work.
What I like about your approach here is that you're actually showing the logic first in a simple do-it-yourself type of approach, in terms of do it by hand. And obviously, we're thinking of how to automate this, how to sort of make a simple logical step and bring it into your system, and not do this sort of hand by hand, one by one. Where is the link to that direction?
Yeah, of course, this whole webinar is just cheap advertisement, of course, because we have a tool that even does it better than you can do it manually. But if you can do it manually and you find that you have the problem, maybe then you're more convinced to try out the tool.
I still love it, whether cheap or not. I still love the way that you say it. And I think this is important. Sometimes when people are talking about their tool or something, they're going in the direction I don't understand what happens in the background. And here it's on plain sight what the actual logic is. And then you bring in something that actually goes through that logic much quicker than a human could possibly do. That's what I like about your approach, just as a feedback here live.
Right. So we do it
Go
in
ahead.
real time. We do it for all
Mhm.
the data continuously. We have a even more sophisticated mechanism that reduces the false positives and makes sure that we find all the true duplicates and so on and so forth. And again, not just for business partner data, also for invoices, you can really find money there. So this is part of this remQ tool. So
Let me
this is
just
an
try and
SAP.
enlarge this so you can actually talk through it. Here we go.
Yeah, so this is an SAP add-on for the ECC 6.0 related version, SAP ERP, or the new S/4HANA. And it's kind of an end-to-end audit tool that in real time monitors all your business processes, completely automates internal controls, and it's not just duplicates. It's if you take, for example, the procurement process, we cover everything from sourcing, setting up your vendor in the system, including a sanction list screening through the whole procurement cycle, from a purchase requisition to purchase order, incoming goods receipt, invoices, payments, and so on and so forth. And we do not just cover procurement, but also the revenue side, HR, payroll, assets, the whole finance area. And yeah, I mentioned that the business partner screening. So it's an extensive tool in that sense. And once you did a manual test and you are convinced that you have certain issues in your system, you might want to try that out. We offer a free trial, or here it's called quick assessment. You can install the tool into your environment, run the controls, and you get results on the same day.
Excellent.
So
I
go to
think
our
that,
website, read the blog.
I just
Yeah, and
wanted
try
to
it out.
say,
Try it out. And if you, I don't know, if you want our Excel template for that, we're also happy to share that. It's no rocket science, but sometimes it's easier if you already have a template with which you can start. Happy to do that.
great. Then I'd say everything's set for now. If any questions have occurred, we're moving over to the Q&A session in a few seconds. Feel free to type in your questions there. If you don't think it's compliant to ask, don't worry about that, because we just read out the questions and then go through the details without actually mentioning who you are. So if that's one of your concerns, don't worry about that. If it's a little bit more complicated, reach out to Jens directly. He's also active on LinkedIn. Other than that, labs@voquslabs.com, and we're going to distribute the question to Jens then. Jens, you ready for the Q&A session? Then I'd say let's move over.
Let's go.
Thanks for staying for the Q&A session. Hi Jens on this side of the room. And let's jump straight over. Let me have a look what we have in there. What the people are interested in. We've touched that topic already. It's about the names, and it actually says, can you also handle names in different scripts like Russian, Arabic, or Chinese? I suppose the answer should be yes. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not so easy because, I mean, first of all, if you want to compare a Chinese name written in Chinese with a German or English name, then you need to define the language into which you translate all the names and then do a comparison. That could be one approach. English is a good candidate for target language to compare names in because it has fewer characters. Like many European languages, they have these umlaute and so on and so forth. So if you reduce the number of characters in the target language, then you have fewer false negatives. And then you could compare the language there. So you need a translation service for that, of course. In Excel, I don't think
It's
that's
not easy, but there is a process, I suppose.
yeah,
Excuse me,
it's not
interrupted you
so
there.
easy actually. I think that goes a little bit too far. What you also can do is you can normalize names, but I don't think that works in Excel. I think you can use Python in Excel, but if you understand Python, then why use Excel in the first place? In Python, you have a way to normalize names. It's called UniDecode, and it creates a normalized version of any word, removing certain characters and so on and so forth. Sometimes the result looks very different than the original word written. You wouldn't even recognize this, but it's a good way to normalize that. Yeah, but you need an external service, and probably you need something like a real software program and use an API to translate or to normalize and so on and so forth. So in a tool, you can do that.
Yeah,
For quick do-it-yourself, I think that's a bit of a challenge.
yeah. Well, that's why it's called quick do-it-yourself, and this is not very quick, obviously.
Quick, yeah.
Talking about intelligence, jumping to the next one. So there is the human one, and there is a AI that's in everybody's mouth, obviously, for years now. There is no AI involved here. How can AI help? Oh, Jesus, I can't even put it out.
Yeah, we touched this briefly. I mean, large language models were great for this purpose, but it's not even the cost if you do it in yourself. Like you can use a local model, costs you nothing. So if you want to try this out, there's a tool called Ollama, OLLAMA. It's free. You install it. You can use different language models inside that tool, and you can even kind of use a small Python program, for instance, that you run, and then you can call the API that is provided by that container and the model, and use that. So, but yeah, you need to be able to install the software to understand how to set up Python and so on and so forth. And so that's one way. And but the latency, the processing time is large. If you have a list of 1,000 names that you want to compare, then you have to do like 500,000 roughly matchings, And if we say that one matching, even if you use a real service, it's 1 second on your local computer, probably it's more like 10 seconds or so, then you end up with a week or maybe a few weeks of processing time just to match 1,000 names. That's not efficient. There's a faster approach, not using language models. You can convert any sort of words and data into a vector. That's like word to vector, and then you can compare vectors using something like cosine similarity. Yeah, but then, I mean, if you know Python, it's not really quick to it yourself maybe anymore, but you already know what you're doing, and maybe this webinar then is not necessary for you.
And maybe it is, because sometimes it's a simple thing. So people are good to go with a small setup, but what I understand what you're saying is everything is expandable and professionalizable depending on what your needs are, where you are, and what you work with. Fine. Let me just see if I have something else here. You guys feel free to use the question panel as said before. I have another one. This sounds specific. I don't have access to SE16 and can't download the data. Are there alternatives in SAP for this?
You can create a query in the SAP Query Viewer. The transaction code is SQVI. And I think the result of the query is something that you can download into Excel. So if you don't have access to tables, which is kind of normal probably, then maybe you can try SQVI.
Okay, that's a quick one. Let me see if we have something else left. I don't see anything coming in. If something comes to your mind, please use labs@voquslabs.com, as Jens has mentioned it before, or find us on LinkedIn, and then we can give you a call or answer in written. Jens, anything else? Otherwise, we'll close the session if you're up for it.
Great. Thank you very much, Stefan, and everyone for joining, for your time. Thank you. You have a good time. Take care.